Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining today's webinar. Everyone's online. Solve voice and video issues fast. I'm Stacy Jambura. I'm the event marketing coordinator here at LiveAction, and I'm also the moderator for today. Today, I am joined by Jay and Chris, and they'll be running through a discussion and demonstration of LiveWire and how we can help you with your voice and video issues. Together, Jay and Chris bring quite a number of years of experience working with customers every day to help solve some of these tough network issues. During our presentation today, if you do have questions, make sure to enter those into the chat bar, and we're going to address those at the end of the presentation in a live Q&A session. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Jay and Chris.
Thank you, Stacy, and welcome everybody to LiveAction, where today we're going to talk about solving voice and video issues fast. My name is Chris Bloom. I am a software engineer and a product manager at LiveAction, and with me today is Jay Botello, Senior Director of Product Management. Hi, Jay.
Hey, Chris. Long time no see.
It's been a while. Yeah. So you've been here for a long time. I've been here developing our software for a long time. You've been directing us in development to do work on voice over IP for as long as I can remember. And the features are great. We have a lot of depth. Our customers really appreciate it. But over the past couple of years, there's definitely been a rising, not demand, but an interest in voice over IP. Could you talk a little bit about why companies are ramping up on voice over IP and what kind of problems they're running into when they do this?
Sure, Chris. And I think it's several things like all at once, right? You hate to blame everything on the pandemic, but of course the pandemic was part of it, right? Because now we not only was everybody using VoIP in the office originally, right, where at least there was some central control over it, now we've driven everybody home. And they're still doing everything over the network, voice and video, right, Zoom and everything else. So it's just increased that much demand. But I think even more surprising to me is that after 20 years, like I said, we've been working on this a long time. And VoIP, I would give it its age at about 20 years. It's probably older than that as technology, but it really started to come into its own about 20 years. What amazes me, after 20 years, we're still talking about VoIP problems on the network.
Right.
I mean, you're with customers a lot of the time, right, on the phone, right?
All day long.
Is it fair to say that VoIP issues in voice and video are one of the key things that customers are still bringing up to you as something they need to solve?
Absolutely. I would say of all the features we have, of all the solutions that we can apply our products to, voice over IP is probably about 50% of that. Certainly there's a lot of web traffic out there. There's a lot of issues with latency, but those are just pages, and people can wait for a page to draw. But when it comes to voice over IP, latency really matters, right? Jitter matters.
Right.
And if it's too long, voice will drop. You expect that to be real time, and as we know, it's not always the case.
Right.
So why? What's wrong with the network?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And for all of the improvements we made in networking in those 20 years, and we made VoIP improvements as well, but they don't seem to have caught up. But I think a lot of it is some of the key metrics that you just mentioned, right? Any other non-real-time protocol, it's much easier to manage that protocol, right, with things out there. But when it comes to real-time, you got to deal with latency and jitter and packet loss, and they're all super critical when it's real-time, right? You can't try again. Trying again takes too long. So you might as well just drop the packets on the floor, right? Which basically means dropping the voice on the floor or the video.
Right.
So
which means dropping the conversation on the floor.
Exactly.
Which means dropping a sale on the floor. Which means affecting your business.
That's right. And it's really those key metrics that are a problem. And that's part of the issue behind solving these voice and video problems, right? It's identifying those elements as well, right? And being able to get at that data, that jitter and the packet loss and the latency. And it's not always that easy to get at that data, right? Especially with flow kind of data. Typical NetFlow isn't going to tell you anything about latency or jitter, maybe a little bit about packet loss, but really not much, right? There are certainly vendors who provide enriched flow, but it's mainly a very small set of vendors, right, that are going to provide that enriched flow. They give you some of that data, but then again, that's not everybody, and it's not going to be across all of your network elements. So it's a very difficult solution, difficult problem for customers to solve. They need to get at that data to be able to solve these problems.
So I love that part about flow, Jay, because you and I, we come from a packets background, and now we're realizing with the integration of LiveNX and LiveWire, the power, the benefits of having both of those in a single solution, where now with the LiveAction integrated solution, you can start from a high level in LiveNX, seeing the flow and alerts generated by the flow and all of the rich information in the flow that's provided by the packet capture and analysis on the LiveWire side. So, that's a lot right there. How about we unpack some of that and talk about that integrated solution and how it's helping our customers solve their voice over IP problems fast.
Right, you're exactly right, and both Chris and I come from a background just strictly from the packet capture side. So, packets will always be able to give you that level of information that you need, right? Because what is packet loss? Well, you have to count every packet, and you have to know when one is dropped. What's jitter? Jitter is the interspacing between the packets. So if all you're looking at is something at the flow level, you're never going to see that interspacing between each individual packet, and certainly not be able to calculate the spacing between each individual packet. That's jitter, right? And same thing for the latency, right? For the latency, you have to be able to trace that packet from where it started, out, and possibly back if you want round trip latency. Again, you're not going to get that out of flow. So packets have always been able to provide that for you, which is great. And now, like Chris was saying, with the integration between, with LiveWire, which does packet analysis, and LiveNX, which ingests flow, we're able to look at that packet data, generate flow metadata out of it that includes these critical metrics like jitter, latency, packet loss, right? And send that up to LiveNX to be able to do this higher level monitoring like Chris was describing, so somebody can start, they can see, bring up a report of your VoIP calls. You can see your VoIP calls. You can see by color which ones are bad, which ones are good. You can click into a call, see what some of the problems that are reported on that call. And then if you really need to go back to the packets to get to the level of detail, you really want to see the jitter, you want to see the interspacing, with a single click you can get right back down into the packets themselves that generated that call.
Can you tell us a little bit about what happens once we find the packets for a particular call and we reanalyze those for a customer? What happens then?
Yeah, that's a great question, because certainly once we're, if we do decide we need to get back down to the packet level to solve that voice and video issue, one of the several large benefits of getting back down to that level. First, in OmniPeak and in LiveWire, and then OmniPeak, the interface into LiveWire, we generate a large number of what we call expert events. Basically, it's a detailed analysis that we do on the packets. And we have that analysis across the board, but there's specific analysis like that for voice and video. It'll tell you things like, QoS not marked, or QoS missing from a packet, or when there's high latency, or periods when there's low mean opinion scores, that are judging the overall quality of the call. There's all of these metrics that are already built in, and it'll associate them to individual packets even. So when you go from LiveNX from a bad call and you get down into the packets themselves, you very quickly, right, immediately have a built-in analysis of that call. You see everything about that call. You see when the call was good, you see when the call was bad, you can get a graph of the quality of that call, you can get all of these individual expert alerts and analyses about that call, and you can even, if you choose, you could play back the call. We support a large number of the different codecs that are behind these calls, and you could actually listen to the call if you wanted to from the packets themselves. So you don't need to be there, you don't need to have originally heard the call, and then make some of those judgments for yourselves about where those things might have gone bad.
Right.
Another key element about having the packets and also then the network data and the VoIP data together is very often, a VoIP problem might not be strictly because of voice itself, right? It could be because of other traffic happening on the network. You know, let's say during that call there was a huge spike from, you know, a gigantic file transfer or a giant backup that kicked in. You know, well that might have in a small office like this, 100 megabit per second connection, we might have saturated the connection for, you know, a microsecond, 10 microseconds, you know, a millisecond, 100 milliseconds. And certainly you get to those 100 millisecond ranges, you're starting to hear the voice quality.
Right.
If I'm blocked from the network for 100 milliseconds, my call is going to degrade.
Yep.
But you won't see that necessarily by just analyzing the call itself. You're going to see that by analyzing the call with the perspective of the network traffic on top of it.
Right. It's that correlation.
Correlation.
And with LiveWire, you know, you're capturing all the packets all the time. You may start with an alert, you drill down, and then you see, oh, this is being caused by something else. So, you know, many times the troubleshooting process is a correlation between different things that are going on in the network. And so, let's say you click on one of those alerts, and I know we have lots of them at the high level. You then drill down into the packets. We're then going to reanalyze at the packet level. So there's going to be a whole lot more alerts. And then can you tell us a little bit about what we would do then? Now you're looking at these alerts, but what I'm trying to do is get to root cause. Mm-hmm. What kind of tools, or how are our customers using the product, and we're recommending that they use it to then, you know, either blame a vendor or, you know, fix an access point or a router or something like that.
Right. Well, certainly one of the best examples of that is the QoS. And by getting back down to the packet level, you know, you can see some of it at the flow, but at the packet level, you can see where and what the QoS settings are on those packets, right? And that then is a clear problem and a clear way to go solve, because you'll know the route of that packet, and you can then identify where in that route, where was that quality of service not getting set. As a matter of fact, actually, even using LiveAction, you can even go make changes to go adjust that quality of service so that we do correct the problem, right? So
right.
That's one real clear way where by getting to the packets and the additional alerts and analysis that are built into the packets, that somebody's able to solve a problem very, very, very quickly.
Right.
You know, some problems are a little bit harder. If it's a latency problem, maybe that is not something you're going to solve immediately, right? You're not going to you'll understand exactly what the problem is by looking at it, but that then could be due to your WAN connection, right? So, but it then does at least point you, like you say, toward a vendor. If it is a WAN connection problem, you then know you need to start looking into those problems with that connection.
Right. Well, and some of these problems, like the QoS problem, that's going to be relevant to just about any application, VoIP application you use. They're all going over the network. They're all going to have QoS. They all have to go through the same routers and switches. But then there are different applications. There's Zoom. There's WebEx. You know, there's many others.
Oh yeah, no, we certainly do support all those, because they you know, in the end they use the same codecs and, you know, video and voice, you know, codecs, basically, you know, encodings and decodings where codecs come from, you know, that are standard out there. They're not developing their own standards for that. But you do, you know, bring up an interesting point by asking that question, because, you know, at the beginning we talked about why is VoIP still a problem, right? Why are we still trying to solve these voice and video problems, and why is it so complex? And some of those technologies, like Zoom and others, they point to that level of complexity, because now you're not dealing with a single VoIP stream, right? You're dealing with a whole number of VoIP streams, everybody that's joining that call, plus video streams, plus everything else, and back to that correlation, right? All that needs to be correlated together. So you know, so what might seem like a simple thing, you know, one teleconferencing instance really breaks down into a whole number of different flows, right? And that's really where the complexity comes in. And
right.
Because we have all of that packet data, though, you know, we're able to break that down and see all of those different flows and see all that's working together.
Right. So on the one hand, it's breaking it down, but on the other hand, it's really building it back up, because with our solution, you're not looking immediately at the packets. You're not looking really immediately at the flows. You know, we're building the packets into flows, the flows into calls, and we're identifying those different kinds of calls. And I think that's important to customers. I know in the calls that I'm on, they want to know, will you identify the types of voice over IP applications that we have on our network? And the answer is yes.
Right.
We identify all of the major types of applications that I'm aware of, and we bubble those up into LiveAction. So at a very high level, you can easily see this application, this voice over IP application is taking up this much of the network, and it's the one that's having a problem.
Right.
So with that, thank you very much, Jay.
Thanks, Chris.
And I will go ahead and do the demo now. At LiveAction, we are here to help you identify and solve voice and video issues fast. Why? Because we know that the quality of your calls are important to your business, but you also have a million other things to do. So MTTR, or mean time to resolution, is critical. So let's get down to it and do some troubleshooting. But to troubleshoot, you have to know there's a problem first. And there are typically two ways this happens. One way is that you get a call from an unhappy user. In this case, the problem has already affected the business, but it is not too late to fix it. So you get the necessary information from the user, like the time range and the IP address, and you do a forensic search manually. For example, here I am looking at the UI known as LiveAction OmniPeak for a LiveWire appliance. I can select a time range. I can click the forensic search. It's got the time range that the user said the problem happened in. Maybe the user will give me an IP address. I can enter that IP address here, and then I can select which analysis I'm looking for, and I go ahead and hit start. And the forensic search will begin, and I end up with, well, quite a few calls. Now, maybe the user would have given me a specific IP address in which it would narrow it down. But in either case, here I am looking at all of the calls with all the packets and all the analysis. That's one way. The other way is to use the LiveAction monitoring tool to see the whole network and to get your alerts proactively and possibly even before it is reported. In this case, the LiveAction alert can be used to perform the forensic search for you. So here I am in LiveAction monitoring my whole network by having the LiveWire appliances capture the packets, analyze them, and send IPFix up to LiveAction so I can see everything that's going on in my network, including the alerts that are coming from the various devices telling me what's wrong with the network, so I don't have to figure it out. It's telling me, hey, these are problems with your network. For example, here is an alert for a voice and video issue of jitter of 200 milliseconds. So I click on that and I can see certain information about that, including the jitter, which is average at 200 milliseconds. That's above my threshold of 30 milliseconds. And I now know that I want to troubleshoot that. It matches the criteria of the user that called me, let me know, or I discovered this before the user even gave the call. So I'm provided with this peak button in which I can just use to workflow from the high level monitoring over to the workflow, over to the packets themselves. So by clicking the peak button, I will now get a forensic search dialog that is completely filled out with the time range, with the filter for the call, and I can just go ahead and run that. And here I am in my forensic search. All the work's done, and yep, we've got ourselves a bad call. You can see that right off the bat. And I'm provided now with many tools, analysis that I can use to start troubleshooting the call. But in either case, whether the user called or whether you used LiveAction, you end up in LiveWire with the analysis that you need to troubleshoot the call. So first, let's look at the call from the highest level voice and video dashboard. You already can see it's a bad call. We also have call quality by codec, call volume by codec, call utilization compared to overall network utilization. So, we can already get a feel for the call, and not just the call itself, but the call over time. In this case, there's a number of possible issues. So let's go ahead and look at the flows view. And in the flows view, we can see that the expert system has identified low MOS CQ, RTP not marked for QoS. These are a few of the experts out of over 100 different experts built into the solution that will lead you to the problem. So first you saw an issue at a high level, giving you an alert based on IP fix. Now we've drilled down, we've reanalyzed the packets, and we can see many different problems. And we can use these to correlate with other analysis in the application. And that's what we do by going to the flow visualizer. We can see for this call, for the individual transactions, we have RTP not marked for QoS. Here's a transaction or a packet where we've got RTP excessive packet loss detected. And that's why we have the built-in flow visualizer, where we can see these transactions in a ladder diagram correlated with the expert events, where at any point in time we can go to the associated packet like this. Go to the packets. Now we're looking at the packets. We're looking at the decodes. Again, the experts correlated with the packets. So this allows us to go up and down, back and forth from the high level view to the low level details as quickly as possible in order to solve your voice and video issues fast.
Well, thanks, Jay and Chris. So we did have a few questions that came through from the audience today that I want to make sure we address. The first one was regarding jitter. They're asking if you can explain it in a little bit more detail and how it can affect call quality.
Thanks, Stacy. I'll start with that one. Yeah, so jitter, as Jay mentioned in our interview, is the space in time between packets, and there should only be as small a space as possible between those packets. And unfortunately, on many networks with all the congestion and other applications going on, there's a lot of space between the packets. There's a lot of latency in between each packet, and overall that creates the jitter. But what we have in LiveNX and in LiveWire is the ability to measure that jitter. So rather than like in the old days having to sit there and look at the packets yourself and the timestamps, we will do the analysis for you, and we'll tell you when there's jitter and what are the many different reasons for that jitter. Am I pretty close, Jay?
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think it's going to take a second to tie it back to the example you showed in the demo, right, where you picked an alert that was based on jitter, right? And we had the threshold set at 30 milliseconds, which is perfectly good threshold, right? Normally it's 20 milliseconds, per packet is what VoIP is aiming for. So, at 50% above that, 30 milliseconds, perfect. And what we saw, right, in that, somewhat artificial data, right, and we're trying to create problems, we saw a jitter of 200 milliseconds, which is far too long, right? Because anything typically more than about 150 milliseconds, and you are really affecting the voice quality. You're affecting the smooth transition of syllable to syllable to syllable, and you'll start to lose pieces out of that conversation very rapidly with that kind of jitter. And then the other power of like LiveNX is because we're looking at the network end to end, it helps you quickly identify where, in the network, what segment is introducing this extra jitter, right? And that's going to then help you decide what you can do about it, right? If it's within equipment you control, pretty easy. If it's outside in the WAN, over the internet, it's going to be issues with your ISP that you're going to need to go address.
Thanks, guys. So I know right now we've got a lot of people working remote, working from home, trying to meet with clients and customers remotely and over teleconferencing. So we had a question came through about teleconferencing. Obviously, that involves multiple participants using both voice and video. So they're wondering what that analysis looks like.
Right. Yeah. Teleconferencing it really, in some ways, it's a very different beast, right? So it's certainly based on real-time protocols. At least some of the time, it's based on the traditional, voice over IP type communication. But it is more complicated than that, right? Because as the question indicates, number one, it overlays a lot of different users, in a single quote instance of that teleconference, right? And you may or may not have the visibility into all of those participants. If some participants are participating from home, going out through their own, internet service provider to a Zoom host and back, you may not see that specific traffic unless you do something specific with that user to see that traffic. But generally, if you're on a corporate network, you're going to see a fair bit of this traffic. And one other layer of complexity in this is that not all of it is, that real-time protocol like we were talking about with, that cause, where jitter and latency, is kind of amplified. Some of that traffic is just straight HTML or HTTP, HTTPS traffic, right? These are, Zoom, Teams, Meet. It doesn't really matter which one you're on. They all have a web-based component to them. And, in a solution like LiveAction and even LiveWire, we identify first and foremost those applications, so you can see them as applications. You can see what is going on, and then we can tie the flows, for voice and video, kind of back into that application, so you can get a somewhat holistic view of that very complex teleconferencing flow or instance. Anything to add, Chris?
Yeah, just follow on with that. That's why in LiveAction we do pull together all the calls that you have visibility into, whether you are getting the call information as metadata from your routers and switches or your LiveWire devices. And to Jay's point, certainly in a teleconferencing situation, it's much more, the more callers you have, the more complex the call is, not just with the signaling, but of course, all the different media flows. And so the more capture points you have in your network, the more live wires, whether they're large appliances or our little edge devices or even LiveWire virtual, spread throughout your network, get capturing as much as possible. As long as you can capture the packets, we will put it all back together into a call.
Great. Another question we got today was, can LiveAction's products monitor quality of service and then send alerts when QoS is not properly configured?
Oh, Jay.
All right, I'll take that. I'm just sorry for the pause, everybody. Between Chris and I, we weren't sure who I was going to take that one. So absolutely, I mean, quality of service is it's actually really one of the foundations of the LiveAction platform. Early on, that was kind of the initial use case behind LiveAction. This is back 10 or 15 years ago now, where government agencies were interested. A government agency was interested in monitoring basically the quality of service, for the communications on their network. And the idea was, build the simplest kind of dashboard that you can build, so
that technicians could sit with a laptop and assess the quality of service on the network, and even make adjustments to that quality of service, the quality of service settings, if necessary. So of course that foundation has remained within LiveNX, so it's highly capable of doing that. And as Chris was just pointing out, the more capture points that you have, whether that's packet capture or whether it's just points where you're collecting flow information from, the easier it is to isolate and then troubleshoot even things like quality of service, because you can see what hops in between where maybe a quality of service bit wasn't set or something wasn't set correctly. And lastly, what LiveNX allows you to do is it actually even allows you to go in and make configuration changes around that quality of service once you identify any issues with quality of service. So it's really a full-featured solution around QoS.
Yeah, absolutely. And great points about QoS features in LiveNX, whether it's the analysis or the ability to configure them. And then if you do drill down from LiveNX into LiveWire, we have many different experts that are specific to QoS. Of course, we decode all of the QoS fields in the packet. So when you drill down, you're going to get a whole lot more detail about the QoS at that level as well.
That's great. Thanks, Chris and Jay, for that. So today, hopefully you've all gained some new insights into how LiveAction solutions work to enable our network teams out there to address some of those key challenges around voice and video traffic. There's a few ways that we can continue to help you. The first one would be to review today's session and either do that, or you can share it with a colleague that maybe wasn't able to attend today. We also have a wide variety of additional webinars available on our Bright Talk channel, so you can go ahead and view any of those past webinars for some additional insight. You may also want to schedule a more personalized one-on-one demonstration for you and your team, where we can look directly into your current network and how LiveNX or LiveWire or both can actually help some of those network issues that you're facing on a daily basis. You can also download a free trial of LiveNX or LiveWire and try it out in your own network. All of the links for these resources can be found in the attachments tab of this webinar. And if you have additional questions, you can always reach out to our team. So with that, I want to thank you all for attending today's webinar. And I want to remind you that we do have part 2 coming up on February 16th. It's part of our VoIP and video packet series. This one's titled Journey of a VoIP or Video Packet. So make sure you pre-register for that so you don't miss out. And we look forward to seeing you in February. Thanks again, everyone.